A British penny from 1967 whispers secrets of a post-war world, worn edges telling stories of hands that never let go. The Washington quarter-dollar coin of 1982 gleams with the weight of modern history, a sentinel of moments both forgotten and remembered. The Lincoln penny of 1954, small yet mighty, carries echoes of a nation rebuilding, a silent witness to dreams and struggles. Imagine the journey of these coins, crossing oceans and decades, touching lives unseen. Each scratch, each dent, a testament to time's relentless march. They've passed through pockets of students, soldiers, shopkeepers, and dreamers. A 1967 British penny spinning in a London fountain, reflecting a sky of possibility. The 1982 quarter, clinking in a New York subway, marking victories both big and small. The 1954 penny hidden under floorboards, waiting for discovery. These coins are more than metal. They are stories frozen in motion. Imagine holding history between your fingers, feeling the pulse of generations. From the clang of commerce to the hush of a collector's cabinet, their journey never ends. From Victorian echoes to modern ambition, they bridge eras. A coin dropped on the pavement becomes a memory. Lost pennies turn into treasures. Quarters become symbols of change. These relics carry the laughter and tears of centuries. History isn't just read, it's felt, touched, and remembered. And in the glow of a collector's light, their stories ignite, waiting for the next hand to continue the journey. This is the saga of the 1967 British penny, the 1982 Washington quarter, and the 1954 Lincoln penny. Legends you can hold, histories you can feel. The history of the British penny of 1967 is deeply connected to the final era of the pre-decimal coinage system, a system that had remained in use in Britain for centuries and carried within it the long legacy of the old SD monetary structure. The penny of 1967 stands as one of the last mass-produced coins before the great shift to decimalization, and its story captures the end of an age when Britain was preparing to modernize its currency system after centuries of tradition. The coin itself was authorized during the reign of Queen Elizabeth II, and its design followed the familiar style introduced in the early years of her reign, carrying on the artistic heritage that linked modern Britain to its earlier Victorian and Edwardian periods on the obverse. The coin presented the young laureate portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, created by Mary Gillick, a design chosen for its grace, simplicity, and classic symbolism of continuity. This portrait represented the Queen, at the beginning of her reign, conveying a sense of renewal for the nation in the post-war era, and it remained widely recognized across the Commonwealth territories that also struck coins with her likeness on the reverse of the penny, appeared the timeless image of Britannia, seated with shield and trident, a symbol that had been part of British coinage since the 17th century, embodying strength, maritime power, national identity, and an unbroken connection to ancient Roman iconography. The 1967 penny became iconic, not because it introduced something new, but because it marked the end of the long chapter that had shaped British everyday life for generations. During the mid-1960s, the British government began preparing for decimalization after decades of debate and public pressure. Modern commerce, schooling, accounting, and global trade were increasingly influenced by simple decimal-based systems, and the United Kingdom recognized that its traditional system of pounds, shillings, and pence, although historically significant, was becoming cumbersome in a world driven by technological progress. The announcement that Britain would fully decimalize by 1971 triggered one of the most intensive coin production periods in modern British minting history. The Royal Mint needed vast numbers of coins, both pre-decimal and new decimal denominations, to ensure a smooth national transition, and among the last coins to be struck in these high quantities were the pennies of 1967. Because 1967 pennies were produced in such enormous volumes, Many millions entered circulation, and yet many were also stored away in bags, drawers, and collections, leading them to become among the most commonly found pre-decimal pennies. Today, their abundance, however, only adds to their historical meaning, as they represent a moment when the old system was winding down, a period when the nation was preparing to replace centuries of monetary tradition with a streamlined modern structure. The production of the 1967 penny continued partly to avoid having to mint a 1968 version, since the focus of the Royal Mint was shifting toward producing trial pieces patterns and early runs of the new decimal coins that would soon dominate British currency. Meanwhile, the familiar bronze penny continued to serve the public, as everyday purchases still relied on the old denominations, and children growing up in the 1960s still counted pocket money in pennies and halfpennies. Experiencing the final decade of a changing economic era, the alloy used for the penny remained the traditional bronze mixture of copper, tin, and zinc, giving the coin its warm reddish color, a color that became instantly recognizable to collectors, historians, and the generations who handled these coins in shops, buses, and cinemas across Britain. As Decimal Day approached, scheduled for February 1971, the penny of 1967 was already transforming from common currency into a historical keepsake, representing the last full year of penny production before the decimal era reshaped British coinage forever. Although some pennies were dated 1970, they were struck only for collectors and were never released into circulation, making the 1967 penny the final circulating workhorse of the pre-decimal system. Once decimalization arrived, the old pennies were gradually withdrawn, though many survived as souvenirs, reminders of childhood, and symbols of an older Britain that had now passed into history. The design of Britannia would later disappear from the regular issue of pennies for decades, before finally returning in a modernized form, reflecting how national symbols evolve across eras. Yet the original Britannia of the 1967 penny remains one of the most recognized and beloved motifs in British numismatic history, representing stability and continuity through centuries of change. Today, collectors value the 1967 penny not for rarity, but for the story it tells. Its presence adds a powerful narrative to collections about the end of the old monetary world and the dawn of the modern decimal age. It is a coin that speaks of post-war Britain, of cultural transition, of economic modernization, and of the everyday lives of millions who handled this bronze piece without realizing they were holding the final chapter of a centuries-old tradition in their hands. The 1967 penny stands as a reminder that historical value is not always tied to scarcity, but rather to meaning, memory, and the passage of time, and every surviving coin continues to echo the last heartbeat of an era that shaped British currency for generations. As we continue exploring the deeper history surrounding the British penny of 1967, we step further back into the long evolution of British coinage and the cultural landscape that shaped this final circulating pre-decimal penny. The story of the 1967 penny reaches far beyond a single year, for it represents the culmination of centuries of changing designs, shifting values, and national identity expressed through metal coinage. Long before Queen Elizabeth II ever appeared on a coin, the penny was a foundational piece of British money dating back to the Anglo-Saxon period, when early pennies were tiny silver pieces introduced under kings, such as Offa of Mercia. These early pennies were symbols of royal authority, minted with the monarch's name and carrying intricate designs that reflected the artistry of the early medieval age. Over the centuries, the penny changed metal size, weight, and purpose, sometimes silver, sometimes debased, sometimes replaced entirely by new denominations, yet always returning in new forms, whenever the economy demanded a low-value coin for daily transactions. By the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution transformed Britain into a global power, and with this new economic environment came the bronze penny introduced during the reign of Queen Victoria in 1860. This new bronze coin replaced the cumbersome copper pennies that had become too heavy and impractical for everyday use. The bronze penny quickly became a familiar sight across Victorian Britain, used by factory workers, shopkeepers, school children, and households from all walks of life. The iconic Britannia design on the reverse had already appeared on coins for generations, but under Queen Victoria, it became especially symbolic, representing British naval dominance, imperial strength, and national pride. This artistic tradition would later carry forward into the 20th century, eventually reaching the young portrait of Queen Elizabeth II and the 1967 penny itself. The 20th century brought dramatic social and economic changes to Britain, and the penny evolved along with them. The First World War strained the supply of metals, leading to adjustments in coin production. The story of the Washington quarter dollar of 1982 begins with a broader journey of the United States Mint, its challenges, its evolving coinage system, and the long-standing tradition of the Washington design. The year 1982 is often remembered as a turning point year for American coinage because it was one of the rare years in modern times when the United States Mint chose not to produce mint-set coins or proof-set coins for collectors. This decision had significant effects on the scarcity appreciation and collector interest surrounding the quarters of that year. The nation in 1982 was experiencing economic shifts, rising costs of metal, rising production expenses, and financial pressure on various government departments, including the Mint. Because of rising operational costs and budget constraints, the Mint decided to pause the production of several collector products for the year. This meant that the only Washington quarters available from 1982 would be those released directly for circulation through banks rather than any specially prepared sets. As a result, high-grade examples of these coins became difficult to find, and over time collectors would discover the importance of the 1982 quarter in mint state conditions. The design of the 1982 quarter continued the long-standing tradition established in 1932, when the Washington quarter was first introduced to commemorate the 200th anniversary of George Washington's birth. Sculptor John Flanagan's portrait of George Washington facing left remained the central design on the obverse, while the reverse kept the majestic heraldic eagle perched on a bundle of arrows with olive branches below, symbolizing both strength and peace. These elements reflected the ideals of the nation and the legacy of Washington as a leader whose values shaped the early United States. The 1982 quarter was struck at two mint locations, Philadelphia and Denver. The Philadelphia Mint historically used no mint mark prior to 1980, but by 1982, the P mint mark had already become standard, so collectors could identify coins from Philadelphia with a P, while the Denver Mint continued to use the D mint mark. Both mints produced millions of these quarters, but because there were no mint sets or proof sets, a large number of the coins entered circulation quickly and were subjected to wear, making pristine examples increasingly rare. The composition of the 1982 Washington quarter followed the copper nickel-clad format introduced in 1965 after silver was removed from most U.S. circulating coins. The clad structure consisted of two outer layers of copper-nickel alloy bonded to a pure copper core. This modern composition allowed for more economical production compared to silver coins, and it also aligned with the mint's goal of meeting the nation's circulating coin demands efficiently. In 1982, collectors and dealers began noticing that high-grade, uncirculated quarters from that year were significantly harder to find than those of surrounding years. The lack of collector sets meant that fewer untouched examples were preserved. This became even more evident in later decades when grading services like PCGS and NGC began receiving submissions from collectors seeking high-grade specimens, only to discover that true gem examples were extremely limited. The 1982 quarters in grades such as MS66 or higher became keys for enthusiasts building date and mint mark sets of Washington quarters. As the year progressed, the mint worked to balance production needs with economic concerns, and even though the 1982 quarter might not have appeared special at the time, it later gained recognition for its role in numismatic history. The scarcity of high-grade examples gave it unexpected appeal and made it a standout coin in the modern era. Beyond its numismatic value, the Washington quarter of 1982 also represents a chapter in the ongoing evolution of United States coinage. During the early 1980s, the Mint was exploring new technologies, updating machinery, and preparing for future design changes that would transform the appearance of American coins in later decades, including the State Quarter program launched in 1999, which revived massive public interest in collecting quarters. For nearly 50 years, the Washington design had been a familiar sight, and the 1982 coin continued this legacy while quietly becoming an important date. For collectors, the simplicity of its design, its circulation-based production, and its connection to the economic realities of the early 1980s make it a fascinating subject for a long-form historical narrative. When examining the 1982 quarter closely, one can observe the sharpness of John Flanagan's portrait, the subtle details of Washington's hair, the curvature of the lettering, and the strength of the eagle's wings on the reverse. These artistic features, although common on earlier quarters, became harder to find fully struck and preserved in 1982 due to the limited survival of mint state examples. This made the study of die varieties and striking characteristics especially important for collectors searching for the best examples with early die states and strong details. As the years passed, interest in modern coinage grew, and the Washington quarters of the early 1980s became an appealing area for new collectors. Many realized that finding well-preserved examples of 1982 and 1983 quarters was far more challenging than finding those from the mid-1970s or late 1980s. The scarcity was a direct result of the Mint's decision to skip mint sets, a choice that unintentionally created modern rarities. Within the numismatic community, the 1982 quarter often serves as a reminder of how external factors such as budgets, economic conditions, and mint policies can affect the long-term availability of coins. What might seem like a routine year for coin production can turn into an unexpectedly significant one when viewed through the lens of collecting. Decades later, the 1982 Washington quarter stands as a perfect example. As your documentary progresses, you can highlight the broader historical context of the early 1980s in the United States, discussing inflation, increasing metal prices, and the nationwide focus on conserving government resources. This helps viewers understand why the Mint made specific decisions and how those decisions impacted everyday coinage. Another compelling angle for your 2-hour narration is the story of how collectors eventually realized the significance of the 1982 quarter. In the 1990s and early 2000s, as grading companies expanded modern coin submissions, the community began to see just how rare high-grade clad quarters truly were. The 1982 and 1983 dates quickly gained attention as collectors competed to find the best examples, and registry sets pushed demand even higher. Today, the 1982 quarter continues to occupy an important place in U.S. coin collecting history. It reflects a time of change. It carries a design rooted in national heritage, and it represents the unexpected impact of a single year without collector sets. The journey of the 1982 Washington quarter, from an ordinary circulating coin to a sought-after modern collectible, makes it a rich subject for detailed narration, perfect for a long documentary-style video. The year 1954 marked an interesting chapter in the long and storied history of the Lincoln wheat penny. This coin, part of the beloved wheat cent series designed by Victor David Brenner, continued to serve as a symbol of America's endurance and economic strength as the nation moved through the post-war years into a new era of prosperity. The 1954 wheat penny remained a cornerstone of everyday American life, appearing in cash registers, grocery stores, gas stations, and pocket change across the country. Millions of these coins circulated daily, each one carrying the familiar image of President Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the classic twin wheat stalks on the reverse, which had come to symbolize abundance, unity, and growth since their introduction in 1909. In 1954, the United States Mint produced wheat pennies at 3 facilities, Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. Each mint struck a large number of coins to meet national demand. The Philadelphia Mint coins were produced without a mint mark, while the Denver and San Francisco coins bore the letters D and S, respectively. The 1954 D penny became the most common of the three as Denver's output was enormous that year. Over 251 million coins came from Denver, making it one of the highest mintages of the series. The San Francisco Mint produced a smaller quantity, roughly 96 million, while Philadelphia produced around 71 million. Even though these numbers seem huge, they reflect the massive economic activity and the wide use of coins in the 1950s, when cash transactions were still the norm. The design of the 1954 wheat penny stayed true to Brenner's original concept. Introduced in 1909, Lincoln's portrait on the obverse was based on a photograph by Matthew Brady and modeled in low relief to fit the small size of the cent. The words, "In God We Trust," appear above Lincoln's head. Liberty is placed to the left, and the date, 1954, to the right. Below the date, one might see a small mint mark indicating the city of origin. The reverse featured 2 stalks of Durham wheat curving around the sides, enclosing the inscriptions 1 cent and United States of America. The motto E pluribus unum, meaning out of many, one appears across the top. This simple yet powerful design made the wheat penny one of the most recognizable and enduring coins in U.S. history. Collectors today find the 1954 wheat penny appealing not just for its historical context, but also for its variations and errors. Some examples of the 1954 D penny show minor die breaks, repunched mint marks, or doubling, which add interest and value among enthusiasts. One of the most sought-after varieties involves the repunched D mint mark, where the letter was struck twice, slightly offset. The 1954 S penny also has minor variations in the strength and clarity of its mint mark, though these are generally more subtle than the Denver issues. Uncirculated examples of all 3 mint marks can still be found in brilliant red condition, since many rolls were saved by collectors and investors during the 1950s, anticipating that the series might soon end. The economic landscape of the United States in 1954 adds depth to the story of this coin. It was a time of recovery and optimism. The nation had emerged from World War II less than a decade earlier and was enjoying a period of strong industrial growth. Families were moving into new suburban homes, automobiles were becoming more common, and consumer confidence was high. The wheat penny was part of this booming economy, passing through countless hands as Americans purchased everyday goods. Its copper composition of 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc gave it a warm, reddish tone that stood out from other coins and symbolized the nation's industrious spirit. Interestingly, by 1954, discussions were already beginning about changing the reverse design of the Lincoln cent. The wheat reverse had been in use for over 4 decades, and there was interest in modernizing the coin to celebrate the 150th anniversary of Lincoln's birth, which would occur in 1959. That change would ultimately bring the Lincoln Memorial reverse, replacing the wheat stalks and marking the end of an era. But in 1954, few people realized that these familiar wheat pennies were nearing their final years of production. They remained part of the daily rhythm of life, simple, reliable, and instantly recognizable. In terms of preservation today, most circulated 1954. Wheat pennies are worth only a few cents above face value due to their high mintage. However, higher-grade uncirculated specimens, particularly those with strong original red color and minimal spotting, can command higher prices among collectors. The 1954D and 1954S coins in gem condition are especially desirable because fully red examples are somewhat scarce due to oxidation over the decades. Proof-like examples occasionally appear, but true proofs were not made for this year as proof coinage resumed only in 1950 and was produced solely at the Philadelphia Mint without mint marks. The story of the 1954 wheat penny is not just about a small copper coin. It is a reflection of a confident post-war America, a country embracing modernity while still rooted in its traditions. Every penny carried a piece of history with it, from the fields of wheat that inspired its design to the enduring image of Abraham Lincoln symbolizing unity and freedom. The coin connects collectors and historians alike to a time when even the smallest pieces of currency carried meaning, craftsmanship, and pride. As one studies these coins today, each nick and tone tells a silent story of countless transactions and generations that handled them, reminding us that sometimes the simplest objects carry the deepest history. This story can be expanded with deeper discussions about minting technology, coin collecting culture of the 1950s, metal composition analysis, and interviews or narrations on how wheat pennies were used in daily life during that decade. Exploring the historical footage of the U.S. mint coin presses of the 1950s, commentary on Victor Brenner's design philosophy and the societal importance of Lincoln's image in post-war America would enrich the viewing experience. The 1954 wheat penny thus serves not only as a collectible artifact, but also as a window into mid-20th century America, bridging the gap between the past and the present in every small but significant detail. The 1954 wheat penny sits in a fascinating period of American numismatic history, a time when the Lincoln cent had already become an icon of trust, tradition, and national pride. The design created by Victor David Brenner in 1909 had endured for over 40 years by that point and had seen the country through 2 world wars, the Great Depression and the beginning of the Cold War. The coin had become more than just currency. It was a small symbol of American identity, familiar to everyone from farmers to factory workers, school children to businessmen. Each 1954 penny carried a piece of that shared legacy, moving from hand to hand as the nation evolved. In 1954, the United States Mint was operating at full strength, producing coins for a booming economy. The country had entered what historians call the golden age of post-war America,